Hello and welcome, everyone. This is just a little glimpse of SwatTank over the last 10 years. Those are all of the logos that finalists have had. But hello, everyone. My name is Katie Clark. I serve as the Assistant Dean for Integrated Learning and Leadership and Director of the Center for Innovation and Leadership at the college. I am so excited that we are celebrating 10 years of SwatTank. As my colleagues know, I was just yelling it everywhere when we knew it was the 10th anniversary. And we're celebrating a decade of innovation, of business plans, creativity, alumni mentorship, late nights with your SwatTank teams held up in a science center room, running testing cycles and practicing your pitches. SwatTank grew out of a partnership between our career services office and students, and later found its home in the Center for Innovation and Leadership, which we affectionately call the CIL. And in the CIL, we provide students the opportunity to practice and develop skills at the intersection of leadership and creativity through programs like SwatTank, like our Leadership Fellows program. We also dedicate time to mentoring and advising for student government, McCabe scholars, athletes, other groups. But really, we're looking to help students dream big, embrace failure, have a bias towards action, work together collaboratively, and have a lot of fun along the way. We're going to drop our website in the chat, so if you want to learn more, you can go ahead and take a look. But we are here tonight for SwatTank. And just for those of you that don't know and haven't seen a live SwatTank, this is an ideation competition where students find a problem, a pain they see in the world, and they solve it. They research and interrogate assumptions about customer segments, about competitors. They see what resources they might need, learn about cost and revenue streams, and talk to experts in industries that they're trying to break into. We have usually a round one where the top 3 teams of those teams are chosen. They go on to give a report, a pitch, and answer questions in a panel of judges that are made up of alumni, entrepreneurs, and faculty and staff at the college. They walk away as a winner with a cash prize. This year, the cash prize for the first place team is $5,000. And we've had hundreds of students participate in SwatTank over the years. And as you might imagine, we've changed things, done things a little bit different from year to year. So the alums you're about to hear from tonight have had a different experience from 2013 to 2021. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my very good colleague, Jen Barrington in Career Services.
Hey people, thank you so much for coming this evening and jumping in. It is such we're all chatting here and we're talking about all these memories. So I'm Jen Barrington and I am the Associate Director of Career Development for Career Services. And I've had the unique pleasure to see SwatTank from its ideation to its realization and experience its continual innovation. It is the perfect program for a liberal arts college like Swarthmore with the liberal arts degree and creative problem solving. So I'm going to do a little timeline here since I've seen it from its incarnation. SwatTank was the brainchild of Career Services, and it was given to fruition by a lovely donation from an alum who wanted to support professional development for students and develop their professional skills. It is truly experiential learning. The teams that come together, they're working as a unit, they are challenging each other, they're learning maybe collaboration, but also compromise and communication and how to be adaptable. We started this back in the early days with the Jonathan Lax Conference, in memory of Jonathan Lax, the class of 71. And that conference was on entrepreneurship. That began back in 2003, as some of you may well remember. And I'll give you a little timeline of some other tidbits that were going on in the world there. So in 2004, you all may remember the show The Apprentice started. Then in 2009, Shark Tank, the show that's still on today, started. And then lo and behold, by 2013, we had SwatTank. And SwatTank was what happens when the entrepreneur spirit caught on campus. This was a team with everybody on campus. We had the entrepreneurship club of students. We had career services, the president's office, the dean's office, the very beginning of a twinkling of the sill. We had workshops. We had, lo and behold, we were on YouTube and Skype. Everything that sounded scary back then, we do now and don't even think twice about it. When we had the joy of Denise Crossan joining Swarthmore in 2016, she brought with her the business model canvas, and that's a tool that students use today. This helped it become an even more educational event. And then by 2017, SwatTank was on its own. The LAX conference had gone on to other iterations, and SwatTank was on its own. They're constantly pivoting. We offer poster sessions. We offer ideation, becoming more viable, and voting. Do you remember when the audience was allowed to vote? Never heard of that before, but Katie helped us figure that one out. We've gone to online and Zoom. We've gone to Tiny Tank. We're constantly pivoting with SwatTank. Some of the exciting people this has touched. Katie mentioned hundreds. We calculated, Aaron Massey and I, who started this back in the day in career services, over 300 student competitors, over 100 alumni, mentors, and judges, and over thousands of audience members who's been touched by this. This doesn't happen just with one group of people. This is across campus with faculty partners. We have partners in staff too, media services, and the makerspace. And a couple of projects I want to highlight, and I'm going to wrap up soon. Some of these items we use today. Rise desk. Whoever thought that we'd all want standing desks? Sure enough, that was one of the early projects. Wallet. How about an electronic wallet for you all, right? Never thought about that. Try Apple Pay now. How about Cricket Protein? Yep, you can buy that in Whole Foods now. Rise food delivery. Never thought that would grow, but gosh, through the pandemic, didn't we all love food delivery? Or how about the travel app where there was going to be a map on your phone? Yeah, that's right. We didn't think that one would work either. And now there's Google Maps. And certainly, items that could celebrate people's cultural heritage, like backpacks. And my favorite quote from one of our very first SwatTank competitions, when asked by an audience member, how will you pay for this if you're not factoring in your own income? Contestant looks back up into the audience. Dad, can you help pay? Yes, we have gone through everything in SwatTank. It's always changing. It's always developing. And who knows what the new ideas. We will see on the next competition on April 14th. And so last thing, I want to end with a quote from the Entrepreneurship Club. And they said, SwatTank is for anyone with an idea can participate. They can and should be part of SwatTank. You don't need to know what you're going to do. We'll teach you. So with that, let's hear about what they had for over the last 10 years.
All right, panelists, take it away.
I think this was, yes, Let's turn our videos on, everyone. There we go. Thank you, Katie and Jen, and hello, everyone. My name is Omri Gal. I graduated in 2020 with a degree in Peace and Conflict Studies and Psychology, and I'm really looking forward to having this conversation today. You know, as I've been reflecting on my hopes and aspirations for this panel, I've sort of been thinking about what typical conversations surrounding entrepreneurship and innovation look like. And to be very frank, I've sort of grown a bit tired of them for a variety of reasons, which I'm happy to go into in a bit. But the main point being, I often find that entrepreneurs or innovators are rarely given the space or opportunity to sort of reflect on and discuss the more personal and emotional side of the wild world of entrepreneurship. And as such, I hope for this conversation to sort of center that. And of course, we can touch upon some of the things that you all are doing. So with that context, to give a bit more of a proper introduction to myself and then passing it on to the rest of the panelists. Again, I graduated in 2020. I'm currently based in Brooklyn, New York. My Lang Opportunity project, which I took a year off from Swarthmore to launch in 2018. It's called Design FC. I've been running that for the past 4 years, and recently it's become its own nonprofit organization. So currently I oversee a team of Swarthmore students that are helping me run the program in Chester, and it's all about working with middle and elementary school students, again, in Chester, on encouraging creative thinking and self-expression through the design of sport jerseys and apparel. And you know, it's been kind of crazy to see how the program has grown over the past 4 years. I know some of you were there to see the early stages of it, but it's, you know, we've yeah, I'll share more in a bit, but it's really been an incredible journey. And lastly, somehow I have stumbled into the food and beverage industry with my family. So I don't recommend it for any of you that are thinking of opening a bar or restaurant, but me and my family jumped in to save our restaurant in the middle of the pandemic with no prior restaurant experience. And I've been doing that nonstop for the past 2 years. And it's been an experience, to say the least. So Seti, if you don't mind, sort of starting us off, introducing yourself, what you've been up to, and I guess your path since we last saw each other at Swarthmore.
Yes, definitely. Thanks, Omri. Hello, everyone. My name is Seti Nam. I am currently a user experience researcher at Coursera, Swarthmore class of 2017. And yeah, since Swarthmore, my first job was as an instructional designer at Tech Change, which was founded by a Swarthmore alum who I actually met at SwatTank, fun fact. And from there, I went to do my master's at Stanford in the Graduate School of Education, studying learning, design, and technology. And currently, like I mentioned before, I'm a user experience researcher at Coursera, an educational technology company, where we work with universities and other organizations to offer online courses, certifications, and degrees. So that's what I'm currently up to, and we'll share more as the panel goes on.
Awesome, and thank you for sharing. I'll leave it up to you to pass it on to the next panelist, or I can choose for you. Michael, go for it.
Thanks so much, Omri. I am Michael Piazza. I'm a 2017 Swarthmore computer science graduate. For about 3 years now, I've been at this company called Audius. We're a Web3 music startup. Basically, you can think of it as SoundCloud, but on the back end, there's all kinds of crazy distributed systems, decentralization, fun stuff happening there. Yeah, I joined when we were kind of like in hacker mode in a garage, and today we're one of the biggest, if not the biggest, consumer crypto Web3 app. So it's been really amazing to be on this journey. I started off as an engineer, and now I'm an engineering manager there, which has been an interesting transition. And prior to this, I was kind of doing stuff at Amazon, like more programming stuff, learning some of the like more traditional big company things, I guess. My SwatTank project was another app. Maybe you're following the theme here. It was this app called Switchboard. Basically, the idea was to pair students in anonymous one-on-one conversations on a college campus and sort of have like a platform for venting, searching for academic support, mentorship, and that kind of stuff. That was a lot of fun. Haven't had much time for side projects since graduating, but definitely reflect fondly on my memories there. And let's see, I can popcorn to Michelle here. We're in the same SwatTank cohort.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Michelle. I graduated Swarthmore, hot pandemic season in May 2020. I studied computer science and philosophy at Swarthmore, and it's been very interesting sort of seeing both kind of continue to be very relevant in my life after. Yeah, so I guess I've been working at Yahoo as an associate product manager for the past 1.5 years. It's funny, this is actually catching me on my last week at Yahoo, and I will actually also be joining Michael in the Web3 space in the next few weeks at this amazing organization, actually a decentralized autonomous organization, a DAO, called Gitcoin, which is thinking a lot about building and funding digital public goods, open source projects, building the open web, and just a lot of really wonderful and very swatty like energy, if I if I can say the least. Thank you, Michael. But yeah, so I've also been thinking a lot about Web3, decentralization, and it definitely is like a, I think in many ways in the same vein of what I was working on at SWAT, which is sort of along the lines of tech and social good, and sort of thinking about like what are some of the intersections there. And I think I credit a lot of the CIL, the Lang Center, the CS department, which I think towards the end of my time at Swarthmore started having the CS ethics classes. Yeah, all of these are also the philosophy department, so incredible and very much has informed my thinking today. So just all of these wonderful pivots throughout SWAT has been, just sort of shaped me into the person that I am today. So I'm very, very grateful and very excited to be back. Yay. Okay, I will popcorn to Kyle.
Hey, I'm Kyle Pierce, class of 2014. I very rarely feel old until looking around at the graduation years of these people on this webinar. Since graduating Swarthmore, I actually am the co-founder and COO of Options MD. So that's a health tech solution that provides personalized care to people who are struggling with severe and treatment-resistant mental illnesses, which actually affect 23 million Americans. So we have a proprietary software we created, we have specialist clinicians and an online community, and we actually help patients find relief faster. At SwatTank, it's funny to think about, I went through it with my still best friend, Chelsea Hicks, from the same year. And it was a men's shoe product that actually had very similar focus because it was really trying to make high quality items available to a larger audience of people. And in a especially mental health climate where everyone's kind of focused on access, we're trying to bring quality back at Options MD and make that kind of like the shining star or the North Star of our company. So yeah, we're trying to dig in deep, and we have a 6,000 person wait list, and it's crazy to come back here and think through how all of my experiences from Swarthmore and SwatTank have really led to what I'm doing now. Let's popcorn to Jalisa.
Hi, I am Jalisa Roberts, class of 2013. At Swarthmore, I studied dance and Black studies as a double major, and was the first ever winner of SwatTank. So how could I not be here today? And I pitched the Cocoon Youth Empowerment Program, which I had been visioning since I think my freshman summer going into my sophomore year. Similarly, I am like the arts person on the panel right now and not tech adjacent at all. And so the goal for the Cocoon was specifically to use dance to rebuild community in my community of New Orleans East by raising students and dancers who were also choreographers and leaders. And so they would be learning dance technique, but also the tools of dance composition that I hadn't learned until I got to college, and leadership as well, to be able to use those skills, knowledge, and resources to do whatever it is that they wanted to do in the future. Very aligned with my Swarthmore experience. And so after winning SwatTank and with continued alumni support and with the generosity of the Lang Center, I got funding to come back home and start the pilot program of the Cocoon, registered as a local nonprofit, gain fiscal sponsorship, and then continue running programming. And things went really well with the program. In about 2018, 2019, we took a little bit of a hiatus because it's hard running a program for as long as I was doing, and with as much energy as I was doing it without also focusing on my own needs. I was teaching full-time in charter schools in New Orleans while also running this program after school and on Saturdays. And we were doing really great work, but we are in a neighborhood and community in New Orleans for whom communication is kind of a black hole. So it was hard for people to find out what we were doing, and I was burnt out. And so I just have spent the past, since that 2018, 2019 school year, really feeding myself, my passions, and the energy of the Cocoon with a wider variety of community members in New Orleans. I've still been teaching classes. I've taught arts residencies, ran enrichment programs at schools. And then in January of 2020, before we went into lockdown, decided to freelance as an artist. I got into burlesque about 3 years ago as Cinnamon Vixen, and has been operating as that performer self for the past 3 years, going into my 4th year now. And so once the pandemic messed with our ability to perform out in front of audiences, I went back to another thing that I started doing at Swarthmore, which was making natural products, and am currently doing double duty, both as a performer and an educator, and as a healer and herbal medicine worker who creates with herbs and serves my community in these many different ways through sensual healing, and as Cinnamon Vixen. So program stopped, but the dream lives on. And I'd love to talk about any of those things.
Sure, I love that. And thank you everyone for sharing. I have so many questions, and also Michelle and Michael, I'm gonna put a pin in Web3, and I think it'd be super useful for you to just sort of give the audience a quick brief on the amazing and crazy industry that you two find yourself in. But before that, I think what Jalisa just shared is a perfect segue into how I want to open this discussion. And I guess also just putting my panelist hat on, just adding a quick personal narrative about my experience, I guess running a restaurant in the middle of a pandemic with my family, is that, I don't know, oftentimes when I'm trying to describe my work or what it's like to, whether it be friends or family or just people that I meet on a day-to-day basis, it's very hard to encompass, I guess, the daily grind and the emotional strain or hardship that sort of goes into running a business. And I often find myself, I guess, at a loss for words to sort of describe the craziness that I'm experiencing sometimes. And not to say, of course, there are incredible moments, there are benefits to it. There are, amazing things that I have learned, but I guess, Kyle, when I was sort of reading about your work, by the way, it seems unbelievable. And I think the work that you're doing is really, really impactful and important. I guess, would you mind sharing a bit more about what your experience has been sort of getting something off the ground, and I guess give us a peek behind the shine of a 6,000 person wait list and seed funding? Sort of what I guess has been your emotional and personal journey along with Options MD?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because I think as a founder, I spend all day pitching to investors this incredibly glossy version of this business, and trying to kind of hide the fact that it's taken, lots of long hours to get to where we are. But basically, very briefly, this business was just born out of a very personal situation that actually happened while I was at Swarthmore. One of my closest friends from high school, who was at Penn, ended up getting sexually assaulted on campus. She got diagnosed with extremely severe depression, failed quite a few medications, and then ultimately committed suicide on campus. That was actually in 2013 when SwatTank happened. And it's interesting to return to that time period as one of the biggest inspirations for starting this company. That pain is something that motivates me to push through all the really tough times. And it definitely is the reason why you work really hard as a founder. I think it's really important to find some kind of core idea that you're working for, because it is really tough. And I think the learning lesson I've had, or I've had to tell myself, is that every success that I've had along the way, we've raised 2 rounds of VC funding, onto our 3rd now. It's that every moment that I'm struggling and every kind of milestone I reach, even though it's maybe been tougher than working at a more traditional environment, I feel like I've learned exponentially more in that process. So I've told myself that every time I've kind of had a struggle that I've overcome, or learned how to sell a customer to patients, learned how to talk to health insurers and get them on board with building a product for an extremely severe patient, I'm saying, wow, I now have the skills, if this were to fail tomorrow, to return back to the workforce and, maybe be 15 steps further than I would have been had I been following a more traditional path. So I always look for the small learnings along the way to kind of tell myself that even if this does go down, I have already accomplished so much, and I have, as a person, derived so much from the journey already. Because getting a wait list requires you going deep into customers. It requires finding money to advertise on Facebook. It requires building a product and selling a dream that might not yet be realized. And you have to make sure that you have the support to also navigate those difficulties, which is why I have a co-founder. And that's why I think it's important not to go at it alone, because that can also be really tough.
For sure. No, thank you so much for sharing. And I definitely resonated with that last part of sort of thinking like, okay, if this all fails tomorrow, there is an understanding, at least, that the experiences that you go through are not like what most other, it's not the typical path, and those learnings along the way sort of, I don't know, they're, in a way, it's comforting to know that those experiences moving forward for the rest of your life will sort of, will serve you in some unknown, in an unknown capacity. Michael, if you don't mind me sort of directing the same question at you, you had mentioned this sort of started in the garage. So would love to hear more about the garage days, and I guess any reflections that you may have on what Kyle just shared.
So my experience is a little different in that I was not a founder. I joined as an early employee, but it's not that different. It is just a massive grind working on a startup. And I feel like you kind of know that going in, but at the same time, there's no way to really appreciate it until you've gone through the process. From the outside, this kind of work is so valorized in media and movies, et cetera. Like, I think of how many people probably wanted to do startups because they saw the movie Social Network, for instance, and it's like got a cool Trent Reznor soundtrack, and it's like, okay, this is what my life is going to be like. It's going to be all fun. No, it's really grueling, and it's like grueling, punctuated with moments of like incredible excitement. And the weird thing is you can see those moments coming and you just have to like set up these sort of milestones and work towards them. Like my first year basically at Audius, we were just heads down building and sort of amongst ourselves thinking like, okay, this probably can work. We have like some interest. I think if you overview the competitive landscape, like what we're building is, it's stands out in meaningful ways, but you never really know until you have that customer validation. And so you have like the first launch that you're looking forward to, or maybe you're looking forward to some sort of fundraise milestone or coming out of beta, or like usage milestones, for instance, or a feature launch. And those moments are extremely exciting, but getting between them is really painful. And growing a company is exciting, but it's also really painful. And there's no way to, I think, know whether or not you'll enjoy doing it without kind of just diving in. So I'm certainly glad that I did. I mean, it's also one of those things where you don't even realize what you've learned until you step away. Like this thing of tacit knowledge is really a thing. I've learned at Audius where like I can't like enumerate all the things I learned, but if I had to think about how I would build something like a company now versus, when I was just graduating SWAT, for instance, it's like night and day, the kind of stuff you pick up. Being earlier, founding your own thing. So I don't know, that was kind of rambling, but there's definitely a lot there.
Absolutely. And I saw a few head nods on my screen. Does anyone want to chime in, or does anyone have a response?
Yeah, I can jump in because as Kyle, when you talked about like the learning as like a key piece of it, I was also reflecting back on even like SwatTank days. I think my definition of entrepreneurship has evolved over time, where in the beginning, for me, it's entrepreneurship to say, oh, like I founded something. I used to think about it as like you start something. And I think over time, I've evolved to think about it not as just the starting points. It's also like the consistency that comes with it. It's like managing team dynamics, understanding, recruiting people, and learning like across the way and using those learnings to just like get better over time. So that definitely, my nods was like, yes, because I think learning is essential piece within entrepreneurship. And it's been good to see how my understanding has evolved over time as well.
Michelle, did you want to chime in on anything?
Yeah, I have just like some fledgling thoughts. My first one is a plug for SwatTank. I think a lot of a lot of what we're hearing there, like tacit knowledge, like learning by doing, I feel like was very much like my first experience of really having that, going through that was definitely through SwatTank and just getting more involved with Katie and the CIL team. So just a plug. Yeah, I think another thing, I'm just sort of riffing off of this like notion of innovation. I think since kind of entering the tech space, I've become like very resistant to the word disruption. Like I think it feels very sexy, it feels very exciting. And I think the question of, does this thing need to be disrupted? Like, shall we let it rest and be at peace? I think is never really asked. So to sort of innovate on the word innovation, I feel like for me now, it actually kind of looks like two things. One, thinking more deeply about maintenance and care, both in just like our day-to-day lives, like what does that really look like? What does it mean to care for the folks in our lives and sort of learn from, histories of care work in reproductive labor, which is ironically also related to my SwatTank pitch many years ago. And then I think also another thing, I think I forgot who was, I think Kyle had mentioned this like idea of like not innovating on your own, or just generally like kind of like bringing in a larger team and just having this be a team effort. I think something that I've been thinking about a lot now also is like I think we hear a lot about the consumption, like content consumption, as well as like content creation, and that sort of flywheel of like create to consume and consume to create, I feel like has been pushed into my spheres of, I don't know, I've just seen it a lot, but I think a new mode of innovation in my eyes actually is this like model of contribution. Like, what does it mean to contribute to projects that you're excited about, that you care about? What does it mean to contribute to other people's visions, other communities, perhaps without the notion of getting something back, right? I feel like I'm trying to sort of, in my personal life, kind of pushing the notion of innovation to not just be this, like, I think especially in the tech world, specifically in Silicon Valley, there's like a very, very like heavy association with disruption. And what I love about, I feel like the way that I learned innovation through the CIL and through SwatTank was like, it could be that, but it also could not be. And it was very much like open to interpretation. So I think now my interpretation is thinking about maintenance and care, relationships, community work, just like public goods, like all of the things that I'm soon going to start thinking about a lot more. And then also like contribution, like what does it mean to kind of build in and with community? I think these are the questions that sorry, another plug, the CIL and Lang and SWAT set me up really well to think about and maybe someday reach a more conclusive answer.
Can I hop in there?
Go for it.
And my thoughts are still not like fully formed. They started forming when Kyle was at the end of his, and now Michelle has taken me on a journey. But I'm thinking about like entrepreneurship and innovation for me as being like outside of the traditional business spectrum. Like, and I think about like what Michelle was just saying too, and what Kyle said about like, if this were to end, like having these skills and resources. I have been in a space from essentially 2019 to now, especially from 2020 to now, of like, what if this ends, quote unquote. And all of the skills that I've gotten while at SWAT, during SwatTank, working with the Lang Center, et cetera, have carried into each facet of entrepreneurship that I have continued throughout. Like I don't endeavor to start a business that has employees or work for anybody else in any type of long-term capacity for the rest of my life. I'm a serial entrepreneur and forever freelancer. But that allows me to do the work that is my purpose work. So all of the fundraising and grant writing and business plan skills that I learned at Swarthmore have directly influenced my planning of the Cocoon, and what the Cocoon has evolved to has become developing curriculum for a K-8 and beyond dance program, has turned into running a grant program as like a facilitator for a grant organization, right? And none of those things are like stable, stationary careers, but they've allowed me to be able to remain completely grounded and sane in a time where in the past 2 years, we've had lockdown, which has meant that I couldn't do my job. We've had multiple variants, and in which through one of them and being stuck at home in quarantine, I then drafted COVID protocols for the performer community in New Orleans, which then meant that I was like helping to coordinate testing for performers in New Orleans. And then because of lockdown, I started like a healing business, which is now like directly serving my community. And so I think like part of disrupting and part of innovating is like rethinking the way that we think about our relationships to jobs and the establishment, and like what it means to sustain ourselves and our communities too. Which I don't think I would have been thinking of in this way if I hadn't gone through SwatTank and one with this type of like art society, like not structured. I'm thinking about the words to describe like what I mean, but a traditional business plan was not what I won off of, right? An idea of a product was not what I won from. It was innovative ways to think about serving my community and shifting like the cultural landscape of my neighborhood, and like the impact that happens in that way. And so it's been really good to think about like what different things entrepreneurship can be, what different things innovation can be, and not just like being a starving artist, for instance. That's not what I'm doing. Thinking about how to describe what I'm doing in the world now, that language is evolving, but I think it ties very intimately to what we've all been talking about.
Jalisa, that was amazing, because I think what you're describing is exactly what I got from Swarthmore, which was the freedom to think beyond maybe the track that you're on. So I was an econ major, I studied Chinese. So all in all, I represented a certain track that was very different than you. I came out of college and went on to become a lawyer, and I felt like all the creativity had been squeezed out of me. So even doing this business in this way was a return to the Swarthmore roots of saying, actually, this can be an expansive landscape of who you want to be, who you are, what it is that you want to accomplish, and you can explore yourself differently than maybe the more structured ways that even Silicon Valley has taught us that entrepreneurship or startups looks like. And that is a major reason why I feel like I've gone through the world, and I feel like you are too in your career, saying Swarthmore has taught me that I can totally stand outside of that and have the wherewithal and the knowledge to think more than just like Michelle said, there's a problem, let's solve it. Let's create a solution to a problem that isn't even there. It's like, no, like, it doesn't have to be just that. There are other ways of being an entrepreneur, being a founder, solving problems. It can look multifaceted. That's what Swarthmore, I think, has taught maybe all of us here.
Definitely.
I guess just adding on to that and sort of also reflecting back on the brilliant questions that Michelle posed that sort of got us on this tangent, but I'd never really thought about the concept of, I don't know, or maybe I never really questioned like the word disruption and the language that is typically used surrounding, innovation and entrepreneurship. And I'd love to hear from, from the likes of Seti and Michael on, I guess you're throwing that question at you in industries that, you're Seti, you're at a company that is known for its innovative approach. It's known for disrupting or even creating a new industry. So I guess I'd love to hear more about what your relationship is to the concept of innovation or your philosophy, I guess, surrounding the field and your work.
Yeah, that's a big one. I'm reflecting. Okay, so two things came to mind there. I think one piece that, like, for myself, I've been trying to do, like, even like more at work. I've been reading this book. It's by Nedra Tawwab. It's about setting boundaries, find peace. And I think challenging like the whole, like, because there is like a grind, like hustle, or like we're like there's like a hustle culture where it's like, okay, you're doing XYZ. So there's an aspect of, like stay up all night, like that kind of thing. And for me personally, I've been trying to think through just like personal boundaries, for example, in the workplace, and like what that means, and being sure that, like prioritizing like self-care and like myself. I do think, in terms of like work culture, I do think we like to think of ourselves as like not necessarily like a disruptor in the space. Like how I think about it is it's like working with different communities, because like I mentioned, I work for Coursera. I'm a user experience researcher, and a huge part of my role is actually listening and advocating for the needs of our partners. So I'm like talking to learners, understanding their pain points. I'm talking to educators, understanding what will help make their work better. And in doing that, it's for me, it feels like more of, it feels more community, I guess, community focused, and more of, this is an industry that we all care about. Like our mission is making education accessible for everyone everywhere. So it's the reason that it, like, I align with it is because it feels more of working with people, advocating for their needs, and ensuring that as a community, as a platform, we're serving them to advance education. So that's how I've been thinking about it to some extent. So I'm still reflecting on the question, but yeah, I'll pause there to see.
That was a great answer, Seti. I can jump in a little bit here as well. I think Silicon Valley definitely highlights, fetishizes disruption in a way that can be really negative for society. Like I think one of the biggest examples is probably like artificial intelligence, right? Which is, we're relentlessly moving towards this sort of like AI automating so many like jobs that are crucial to the economy. And what happens to all of these people that are not, have the sufficient training to move to other jobs. And so tech has sort of tried to come up with other alternatives like universal basic income and this kind of thing. But or like look at Lyft and Uber, which have, provided employment for a large number of people, regardless of, the problematic nature of the gig economy. But the ultimate plan of Lyft and Uber was to always switch to like an AI driven model, right? But if you actually take a car ride and talk to people like, Lyft drivers or Uber drivers in general, people are not aware of that. So there's like a very negative, like bloodthirsty capitalistic kind of destruction that I think happens a lot in Silicon Valley that should not be valorized. Like you have to, I think of what you are destroying if you're engaging in this disruption thing, and also recognizing that it's extremely hard to predict. This is a little bit more about innovation, but it's really hard to predict, I think, how people will use a given technology. Like instances I can think of off the top of my head, it cuts like in both ways. There's this really interesting tool I've been seeing, this startup that's sort of supposed to prevent like online cyberbullying. And somebody actually figured out how to use this tool, which was incredibly like, is a sort of a positive thing for society, but people figured out how to use this tool to actually harass people online, right? In this really sinister looking way. And then on the flip side, like in Ukraine recently, people have been using Tinder to find homes to stay as they're evacuating from cities that are being bombed. So it's really hard to know how the things you're creating will be used. So I think you just have to like approach it with a degree of humility and constantly be reevaluating whether the thing you're building is actually good for the world, and knowing that you may need to pivot. Like Facebook is, I think, a really common example, right? It was designed theoretically with the purpose of creating a hyper connected world, and connection is good. You get to talk to your family members that are living far away, but then it turns out that too much connection, invites filter bubbles and can tear apart the fabric of democracy and all of these other things. So yeah, you're kind of unleashing Pandora's box with innovation. It's a real responsibility.
Does anyone have a immediate response to that? I feel like there was a lot there.
I'd be curious to know how some of my fellow panelists are balancing that, exactly what Michael said though. How are you kind of thinking through your ultimate goals of maybe they're finding financial success with being conscious of society, if that's important to you? I feel like, especially in the healthcare industry, like, yeah, this needs to be a venture backable business. And I'm consistently talking to investors who want to see returns, but I'm always trying to make sure that the people who I'm inviting inside are believing in the vision that my co-founder and I have, which is to actually change lives and create quality of care. So, people like Michelle, Seti, people who even aren't founders themselves, as you think to grow on, how do you want to balance those two ideologies?
I can attempt to riff. This is a really good question. I'm trying to think, like, collect my thoughts. Yeah, I guess maybe just to start deep first. I think like when I was like 7, I remember like my mom was like taking me back from like a piano lesson or something like that. And I was like, it's like, Mom, I was like, I'm gonna die someday. I was like, I want to do something great in this world. And she was like, what? She like turned around and I was like, well, what? But also like, it was like a great conversation. Yeah, I think there is still a little bit of that left where I'm sort of like, I'm gifted this time in this world to exist and to form wonderful relationships with people. And I think I spent a lot of my time in college also thinking a lot about like, what is like my purpose? Like, what does meaningful work look like for me? How do I balance those things? And what sort of questions do I want to continue to ask myself? And I think the spoiler alert is that you don't know the answers, and you have to continue to ask yourself those questions time and time again and sort of continuously calibrate. But I guess maybe with respect to work specifically, and maybe also touching upon Kyle, you said around finances. But I think with work, I've started to I'm trying to reshape my relationship to work sort of into two ways. I think I'm trying to reframe it a lot more, and I think there's a lot of privilege here as well, but trying to reframe it a lot more as like, what am I seeking to learn from this workplace? Like, what are maybe the technical skills that I want to build, maybe the people that I want to work with. I think money is obviously a factor as well. It's really important to me that I got to like move to New York after graduation and live my like New York life, and things in New York are expensive and I have bills to pay. And then there are things to sort of factor in there. But yeah, I think first and foremost with work, I was thinking a lot around, or now I'm sort of moving on after my first job out of college. I'm thinking a lot about like, what are the things that I want to learn? What are the things that I want to do that maybe are uniquely suited for this company or organization, or like whatever that might look like. And I think right now, I guess like, I don't know if this is my end goal in life, but I think, one other thing I was going to say is also very, very helpful to sit down and itemize like all of your finances and itemize all of your spending and be like, is this good? Do I want to do this again? I think that actually is like a core adult skill that I'm learning in the process of learning. I think is actually like really helpful when thinking about like salary and thinking about like what you need and also what you want to spend your money on, and maybe like just generally just being really conscious there, but not a financial advisor. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Just generally good to sort of have financial wellness awareness, and that can be a factor in what you want to spend your time on. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, right now, this is constantly evolving, but I think what brings me the most joy is getting to build cool things with cool people, which sounds it's really vague, but I feel like it's really actually just like thinking about like projects that I can build with my friends, or communities that I really care about that I can contribute to, tech or not tech. I think more and more I'm just realizing that like the people that I get to meet in my life, Swarthmore is not an exception, or just like, dare I say, one of the reasons why life is as beautiful and as full and as rich as it is. So I've been trying to sort of really optimize for that in my day to day. But I do not have all the answers. I think this is just sort of like my process currently. And I think Swarthmore is, I think without the community and the culture that was Swarthmore, I don't think I would actually be asking myself a lot of these questions. So yeah. I'll pause there.
Can I hop in briefly?
Yeah, please.
For me in the spaces that I worked in that were not just me, I've always been interested in leveraging whatever privileges I've had in the space to do community work. So when I was teaching dance with my class, it was just always about leveraging my students' needs first. But when I then was mentor teaching and over the entire enrichment department at the charter school that I was working with, I had gone through an alternative teaching program. I'd gone through Teach NOLA by then, and I was a practicing artist and like teaching artist. Whereas most of the other teachers in my enrichment program were professional artists who weren't teachers. And so then that entire year, which ended up being thankfully the best year that enrichment had, was me being able to speak both languages and teaching the teachers under me what that language was so that they could subvert the system ultimately. Because when folks were coming into that room, what they thought was innovation was that students would be doing art the same way that they were doing the rest of their classes, that they would be sitting a certain way, that there would be the same expectation, like cultural expectations for behaviors. And so you would walk into a dance class and see 20 students engaged in all types of movement, or martial arts, if it was a martial arts class, and you would think it was chaos, but this person who's been doing this for 20 plus years knows and understands the discipline of the room that they're in. And so in that instance, it became about teaching them to speak the language so that they could continue to do the work that they did, and so that the powers that be could see the value of the work that they were doing, that there were rubrics, that there were metrics, that it was designed by them and with their community in mind, to then be able to push and challenge the thinking of the status quo from this position of like privilege that I was in. It was similar when I facilitated one of the grant programs in New Orleans or in Louisiana, where questioning has always been the thing that I do. So thinking about if this is going to be the first grant for culture, how are they able to access these funds in ways which into this thing if I'm not someone who's used to writing a grant application? How can I submit a video instead? Or how do we challenge the ways that we're thinking about like the communities that we serve? So that is the thing that brings me great joy in the work that I do with others, is continuing to question both myself and the like structures that are in place about how we can better serve those that we claim to be wanting to serve with the resources that we have access to. I think that was it.
I love that. And if I could like add one thing, I think the thing you said at the end there about service is so key for me. Like if it's this question, right, of how are you balancing wanting to do something that's good for the world with the requirements to fund your company and have returns for your investors and all of this stuff. And I think for me, it's like I have to, not that I'm personally returning to my investors, but always reminding myself that at the end of the day, the point of this is to provide a service to people and to provide something meaningful that improves people's lives, and finding ways to remind yourself of that as consistently as possible. Maybe that means talking to the people that are actually using the product or within the community that you're forming, and finding out the ways in which it's succeeding to better their lives and the ways that it's failing, right? And always learning from that, and surrounding yourself by people that care about similar things, I think is really important. One note I will say is like, if you are thinking of joining a startup as an early employee, I think trying to suss this out of the founders is one of the most critical questions, whether the founders are legitimately devoted to the mission, whatever the company may be, or whether this, the mission is basically just a way to raise funding and have an exit ultimately. And I think that a lot of this culture comes from the top down at startups. So you really got to make sure that folks are aligned there and do your due diligence.
I'm going to also quickly hop in there, Ari, just real quick. But I do wanted to, I did want to add to that, because Jalisa, when you're talking and two things jumped out at me, like one about like leveraging the privilege in the space that you're in. And then like when you talked about service, I think one thing, when I was at SwatTank, being able to do SwatTank gave me the confidence that we could come up with an idea, pitch that idea to people, and be able to galvanize support in some way. And I think that similar mindset, even like within the company, it's helped me, whether it's like ask questions or pitch other ideas when I see a gap. So a common thread between some of the things I've done is like I care a lot. I'm from Ghana originally, care a lot about Africa. So came into Coursera, I was like, all right, like found out that, and now like what I'm doing is I'm like co-leading what we have Coursera for Africa. But it's like being able to see the gaps and like boldly be like, okay, actually, can we do XYZ? How can we do it? And then galvanizing supports in that way. And for me, Kyle, I think that's how I've balanced it, where it's like you're in the institution, I'm like currently in that institution, but it's like constantly seeing opportunities and like areas of improvement and being able to boldly pitch an idea and think through how to work in service of your community and your mission as well.
Amazing. Just quickly before we wrap up, I did want to throw one question that we have from the audience at you, Kyle, if you don't mind. And the question is from Chad. What advice would you give to someone just starting a business? What are the necessary fundamentals to become successful with this? And if you don't mind me throwing a second part onto that question, just building off of what Michael was saying about sort of sussing out, or getting a sense for the true motivations of a founder. I guess, how do you go about intentionally showing the people that you're working with, that you full-heartedly believe in what your company is built to do? And I guess, how has that feeling or passion evolved as you've continued to work on it?
So Chad, really quickly, I would tell you what SwatTank also helped me understand was be strong in what you do know and don't be afraid to get help and mentorship for what you don't. I think I came at a healthcare company as a healthcare attorney. I had no idea about the clinical side, and I very quickly found a way to get assistance to figure out what that looks like. But ultimately, you have to stand in your own vision, because not everyone is a visionary like you are. Also, do lots and lots of tests and listen to the people who you want to sell to. A big thing for us really early on was just going straight to customers before I built anything, and actually listen to what their journey was like. To Michelle's point, what the problems actually are, so that I'm addressing something that's actually real. And that way, when I'm building my product, it already has a use and a purpose. And then ultimately, the way that I'm always talking to my employees and my advisors about showing them where my mind is everyone who comes on my team, my co-founder Morgan and I sit down with them and give them the entire founding story of this company, so that everyone is on the same page about why we're all here. I think that's a lot of the reason why we've been able to attract a team of 10 people who are still the same people from 2 years ago, is because they are all operating on that same vision. And I think it's so important that people understand exactly what is driving you, because it's, at the end of the day, money, all that really, it loses its shine for people. And it's you'd be surprised, most people are purpose driven, even when you don't think they are. But Chad, I would definitely say, like, feel free to reach out to me for more direct advice, because it is a journey, but I always ask for help. That was my biggest lesson early on.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Kyle. I also just want to say thank you for sharing that, because I'm sort of going through the initial stages of launching a nonprofit that's very much mission and impact oriented. So I guess hearing from you and learning from you how you went about that is definitely something that's going to stick with me. And unfortunately, we are at the end of our time. Just want to quickly shout out some of the people on this call that we've heard how they've impacted some of our panelists and me personally. I think people like Katie, people like Denise, I see you in the attendee section from the Lang Center. You completely changed, and of course the rest of the CIL team, you've completely changed the trajectory I had at Swarthmore. And like many of the people on the panel said, it's like the ways in which we're thinking, the work that we're doing, the questions that we're asking probably would not have happened if it wasn't for all of your work and your time and your love and your care. So just wanted to say a deep, deep, deep thank you for all that you've done for us and continue to do for the Swarthmore community. And a huge congratulations on reaching 10 years of SwatTank as well. And with that, thank you, everyone. I'll pass it back on to Katie.
That was very nice, Omri. Thank you. Just a huge, massive thank you to the six of you. This was an amazing conversation and really appreciate your candor and thoughtfulness. I think we have a lot of notes going back into SwatTank season, as we're right in the middle of it. But I'm having a lot of questions about how we help students understand boundaries and purposeful work, and how they define innovation and what they're learning and how they're learning it and where they pay attention to that learning, because I think that that is a really important piece of this puzzle. So a huge thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. SwatTank finals are on April 15th at 4:30 p.m. in Sci 101. We have not had an in-person SwatTank in 2 years, so we're very excited about this. And let us know if you need anything, cil@swarthmore.edu. And thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate it. Have a good night.